I was here for that one, but I watched this one online. Can you still do that? Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, they're on their website under their YouTube link. Okay. Tech stuff. But I'm also did you get a flyer? You got the. Yep, that's it. Time for questions? Stump Jody. Stump. This is interesting, so. Not an expert on Buddhism. It's just on our eyes. I heard from her Martha. She emailed me that she's planning to come next week Sunday. They have to plan something special for the children. Let's just ask her.
There's some up here.
Tracy at all? Is that the old I get it for the Episcopalian, Episcopalian, I think they just that and stuff with the matching. Yes, Episcopalian. There is maybe a certain coming over here. Can you guys hear for one of the oceans? I was here last month. Oh, I was here for the last one, but not the first one. I was here the first one. What's that money? It's not.
It's going to say, wait, I need that shot I can get for this time of day. So I'm a bookkeeper and I work I wasn't working today, I was working because something here. I always work from home. I work for a vet practice and work for a and I just always work at home. Because everything, you know. No, not really. It's a. Well, I'm at home, like when you go out and I'm well, I do in the summer. Oh, yeah. God bless you. I do it. Well, I tell you, years that. I know it was. That's the first time. That's the first my eyes. Well, I can mindfulness. Oh. I don't think there's ever going to be a time when we don't relax. And I never give you makeup, so there's expense, you know, why wear makeup? Done. Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah, I even cutting my own hair, you can probably tell. Oh, yeah, well, it takes me hours because I'm not trained to cut hair, but I just decided I'm gonna do my hair. I don't go out enough because I work at home. And my people at church have to love me. Every hour. So long, you think of practice. It's practice. Just like, and I have a kind of hair, speaking of hairdresser in my congregation, and my pastor. She's so diplomatic. I love her. Well, you have very big hair. I had all this curl and stuff. Yeah, I did it. Well, I just cut it. And I had a natural curl there. But of course, where I want the curl right here, it's just whatever. It's just, I figure someday when I get cancer and I have radiation, you do that. Try to keep it. I'm going to keep my ears away. I think it's harder to do short hair because I used to have over there. Because my husband's a gay bar, he was a part of that. Well, mine is pretty short. I think we want to be and I really, really short. He saw my driver's license and it was really, he still saw it. So I started to grow it. Something like that. And you know what? Oh, yeah. So that's for the next 10 years.
That's hard.
Yeah, I'm going to be going.
There's wars.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to St. Anne's Episcopal Church and to Community Faith Conversations. Community Faith Conversations is brought to you by GIFT, that's Gathered in Faith Together, which is a group of 20 faith communities in the greater Green Bay area. They have been providing interfaith worship opportunities for Thanksgiving and Martin Luther King Jr. Day for 15 years now. Community Faith Conversations happens the second Tuesday of the month, all the way through March, and there are flyers available with the dates for the future. On your way in, you were given a blue question card, so you will know the category that you're answering the questions for. No, so that you can write questions down. We'll collect those cards after the presentation, and we'll see about passing those up to Jody and get those questions answered. Our speaker tonight is Miss Jody Figgins. Jody has lived in Green Bay most of her life. She has Catholic roots, and about 20 years ago discovered the Buddhist master Thich Nhat Hanh and his teachings. She is a member of his Order of Interbeing, a community of monastics and lay people who have committed to living their lives in accord with the 14 Mindfulness Trainings, a distillation of the, I told you I was going to mess it up, Jody, Bodhisattva teachings of Mahayana Buddhism. 10 years ago, she founded Open Heart Mindfulness Community, a Buddhist Sangha in Green Bay. She has 2 sons and currently lives with her husband, her college-age son, and their 2 cats. She works part-time at NWTC, shares mindfulness in the community, and provides hands-on energy work. She enjoys reading, being in nature, and connecting with people and the environment. And it is our pleasure to invite Jody forward to share her teachings on Buddhism tonight.
So hello, everybody. It is just such a joy to be here. I am honored to be invited and to speak with you tonight. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about Buddhism, and we'll go kind of over the history briefly. It's not my strong point, I'll tell you right now. And also the streams and scripture in Buddhism, the main teachings, and about who is Thich Nhat Hanh. Maybe some of you have heard of him, maybe some of you haven't. And then I will be sharing about the Plum Village community of engaged Buddhism. So starting with a brief history, the Buddha lived in India. Now, there's a little bit of discrepancy upon the time period, depending upon who you talk to, but he's believed to have lived between the 6th century before Christ up through 563 BC. And he was born a prince into a royal family in northern India, which is now part of Nepal. And his name was Siddhartha. And when he was born, it was predicted that he would become either a great king or a great spiritual leader. And his parents wanted him to become a king, and they kept him in the palace and tried to prevent him from seeing the suffering in the world. And he was surrounded with every pleasure in his life. At age 29, at a rare outing from the palace, he encountered suffering. He saw an old person, a sick person, and a dead person, all for the first time. He was upset to realize that old age, sickness, and death would hurt him and everyone he loved. And he was also fascinated by the sight of religious people seeking the answers to life's great questions, and he wanted to learn more about how to end suffering. So one day he snuck off in the middle of the night, leaving his wife and young son. He left the palace and set off alone into the forest, seeking an answer to suffering. And he came upon 5 people, 5 companions, all ascetics, and they traveled together. They sought enlightenment through extreme measures, through self-deprivation and self-mortification, fasting, sleeping on stones, living outdoors with little clothing, in the belief that making themselves suffer would cause a spiritual breakthrough. But eventually, Siddhartha realized that enlightenment would be found only through mental cultivation, not through punishing his body. So he gave up the ascetic practices and sat and meditated all night under a tree, which we now call the Bodhi tree, which means awakening. And there are several versions of this story. I'm just going to share with you a short version. As a to-be Buddha, he sat there in meditation under the tree all night, and the demon Mara brought his most beautiful daughters to seduce Siddhartha. However, he remained in meditation. Then Mara sent armies of monsters to attack him, and yet Siddhartha sat still untouched. Eventually, Mara declared that the seed of enlightenment belonged to him and not to the mortal Siddhartha. And Mara's monsters cried out together, "I am his witness." And Mara said to Siddhartha, "Who is your witness?" And Siddhartha reached out his right hand to touch the earth, and the earth itself spoke, "I bear you witness." And then Mara disappeared, and the morning star rose in the sky, and Siddhartha realized enlightenment and became a Buddha. He set off to find his original 5 companions and gave his first sermon in Deer Park. He declared himself a free person, and the 5 became his first disciples. He had many disciples and spent the next 45 years walking around northeastern India spreading his teachings. He presented himself only as a teacher, not a god or an object of worship, but he is said to have performed many miracles. Buddhism has been practiced for about 2,500 years. It is the 4th largest religion with over 400 million people. And like I said, it doesn't promote worship of a deity, and it promotes enlightenment and moral value, meditation, and a spiritual path. Buddhism has Indian and East Asian roots and also became known and influential along the Silk Road, cross-pollinating with other traditions. So contact between Buddhism and the West is pretty ancient, and Buddhism has been part of the West's spiritual roots for a long time. Meditation is at the heart of Buddhist way of life. It is basically a method for understanding and working on our own mind. We become familiar with the inclination of our mind, our different negative mental states, and learn how to develop peaceful and positive mental states. And the teachings of the Buddha reveal a step-by-step path to lasting happiness. Every living being has the potential to become a Buddha. If we apply the appropriate methods, we shall experience the happiness of enlightenment, just like the Buddha did. So getting into the streams and the scripture, beginning with Ananda. Ananda was a disciple of the Buddha that followed him everywhere, and he was a cousin of the Buddha. He had a wonderful memory, and he memorized all of the Buddha's talks. And after the Buddha passed away, he repeated exactly what the Buddha said during his life. Later, all of this was put down in writing, and that is why we have the sutras today. So the case, right there shows a collection of various sutras. In sutra, we also may have heard them called suttas or discourses, depending upon the stream of Buddhism. You may hear the word, it all means the same thing. It is the teachings of the Buddha in written form, and they exist in Pali, Sanskrit, Chinese, Tibetan, and Vietnamese. Originally, a kind of Bengali language was the original language. And then the original talks were written on thin slices of wood or palm leaf manuscript or bamboo. Most sutras begin with, "Thus I have heard," because they are all memorized talks. Some of them don't, but most of them begin with, "Thus I have heard," followed by a mention of the place where they have heard the teaching by the Buddha. Over the centuries, 2 main branches of Buddhism emerged, and then a further offshoot developed later on, and all 3 branches began in India and developed further as they moved across Asia. Theravada is believed to be the oldest form of Buddhism. This tradition upholds the monastic path and adheres to the Pali Canon, and Pali is the sacred language. It contains the largest collection of teachings as well as rules for monastics and Buddhist philosophy. In many Mahayana traditions, there are teachings outside of the Pali Canon. It focuses on the teachings found in the Mahayana Sutras preserved in the Chinese Buddhist canon, in the classical Chinese language. There are many different schools and traditions with different texts and focuses, such as Zen and Pure Land, and the term Mahayana means great vehicle and refers to the path of the Bodhisattva, which means enlightened being. In Tantric Buddhism is sometimes considered part of the broader category of Mahayana instead of a separate tradition. And besides the study of the major Mahayana texts, the main texts of the Indo-Tibetan Buddhism are contained in the Tibetan Buddhist canon. Well, moving into the teachings of the Buddha, we have here what's called the three jewels, or the triple gem, or the three refuges. When Buddhists the disciples would vow to follow the Buddha, they would take refuge in the three refuges. The three refuges are different expressions of an awakened mind: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Taking refuge here is the recognition and the determination to head towards what is most beautiful, truthful, and good. It is the awareness that one has the capacity to understand and to love. So I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows us the way in this life. This refers first to the historical Buddha. His example shows us that we too can follow the path to enlightenment. The Buddha principle also refers to all teachers and enlightened beings who inspire and guide us, all of our ancestral teachers. And I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and love. The Dharma is the teachings of love and understanding of the historical Buddha and his descendants that show us the path leading to peace and deep insight, love and understanding. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community who lives in harmony and awareness. Sangha has come to mean the community of Buddhist practitioners, both monastic and lay. So community, or Sangha, your words, maybe you're familiar of hearing, maybe fellowship or church. And the Buddha respected people's desires to practice their own faith. So the teachers, the triple gem, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, the teacher, the teachings, the community, this can encompass traditions and experiences outside of Buddhism. The original 5 precepts, when you take refuge into the 3 jewels, normally you're vowing to follow the 5 precepts at the same time. So when I first went and received in my tradition, which I'll go into a little bit later, instead of the 5 precepts, it's the 5 mindfulness trainings. I took refuge in the precepts, vowed to study and practice the 5 mindfulness trainings, and then received a name in the tradition at that time. The Buddha's original 5 precepts constitute the basic code of ethics undertaken by lay followers. And they sometimes have been compared to the 10 Commandments in Christianity. And undertaking and upholding the precepts is based upon the principle of non-harming. And the principles are to abstain from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and intoxication. You may have heard of the 4 Noble Truths, other teachings, or also known as the 4 Holy Truths. The first noble truth is that suffering exists. So life has inevitable suffering. All of us suffer to some extent within our body and our mind. We have to recognize it and identify it, to acknowledge the presence of ill-being and to touch it. But it's incorrect to say that everything is suffering. This was not the Buddha's intent. One of Thich Nhat Hanh's quotes regarding suffering I'd like to share with you. Our suffering is holy if we embrace it and look deeply into it. If we don't, It isn't holy at all. We just drown in the ocean of our suffering. And the second noble truth is that there's a cause to suffering. There's roots to our suffering. We suffer and we recognize that suffering is there, and then we look deeply to see its origins. Without first touching it, knowing it, we can't look deeply into it and understand the causes. And the third noble truth is that there's an end to suffering. So many people, they look at the noble truths and they see suffering, 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 but this is the one that is good news. Happiness is possible. So by refraining and doing the things that make us suffer, we can reach nirvana. And that means our ill being can be transformed. The fourth noble truth is a path that leads to the end of suffering. This is the noble eightfold path: right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And we can see the nature of interbeing in all elements of this noble eightfold path. The path is a practice of our daily lives, not just in special times. It's a practice of an engaged Buddhist. The Buddhist taught us that his teaching is just a raft to help us get to the other shore. Don't be caught by the raft, and we do our best to practice the path this way. The first on the noble path, eightfold path, is right view. We should be able to distinguish the wholesome and unwholesome seeds in us and have faith and confidence that there are people who have been able to transform their suffering. And this is the faith in Buddhism. Again, it's not worshiping a deity. We have faith that we have Buddhahood in us. We have the capacity to become enlightened. We have the capacity to overcome suffering. And we shouldn't be fooled by what we see in the world or our ideas of happiness, and we should always ask about our perceptions. Am I sure? Because our wrong perceptions keep us from having right view. Our insight, wisdom, knowledge, happiness, and the happiness of those around us depend very much upon our capacity of right view. And it's the insight that can fill us with understanding, love, and peace. Everything here depends upon right view, and right view depends upon right mindfulness. When you practice right mindfulness, concentration is easy. The energy of mindfulness already contains the energy of concentration. And with mindfulness and concentration, practice looking, listening, and touching deeply. And out of that, right view is our fruit. Understanding can grow. And we are diligent. Diligence on the path. We're diligent in our practice. It's a way of being. Right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood are easy and natural when the practice of right mindfulness, right concentration, and right view have become solid. Mindfulness is the base of practice and is the heart of Buddhist meditation. Buddhist meditation is made up of that mindfulness, concentration, and insight or understanding. And the picture I chose here is a picture of a window at the monasteries. I don't know, I haven't been to all of them. I've been to 2 of them, but I believe it's in Plum Village, but it's in the United States monasteries. And the words on the bottom, they mean mindfulness, concentration, and insight. So the aim of Buddhism is a clear vision of reality, seeing things as they are, understanding our relationship to it, and that's acquired by our concentration. And this clear vision, this insight, that's what enlightenment is. We hear that word enlightenment, nirvana, a lot in Buddhism. And there's 2 sutras that guide us in meditation. One is a discourse on the full awareness of breathing, and now's my chance to not know how to pronounce a word, but I'll try. Anapanasati Sutra. And then there's the discourse on the 4 establishments of mindfulness, the Satipatthana, I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, where we observe our body, our feelings, our mind, and the objects of mind. And to be mindful here means to be fully present with our body and mind united, not in a state of dispersion. It's a protecting agent because mindfulness contains the energy of concentration and understanding. And taking hold of our breath is central to the practice. Taking hold of the breath is itself mindfulness. And in such moments, existence can be miraculous and mysterious. We can look at things with a sense of curiosity, and everything becomes a miracle. And whenever our mind becomes scattered, we use our breath as the means to take control of our mind again. So our mind starts going, come into our breath. So we bring our mind down into the body with the breath. And I'll share a few practices that we do together. If you wish to practice with me now, I invite you to. Breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. Breathing in, I know if I'm breathing in a long breath or a short breath. Breathing out, I know if I am breathing a long breath or a short breath. Thus we train ourselves. Moving on to our body. Breathing in, I am aware of my whole body. Breathing out, I am aware of my whole body. Breathing in, I calm my body. Finding any areas of tension, what are we feeling in our body? Breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I calm my body. We train ourselves this way. And mindfulness of feeling is mindfulness of feeling directly and not some contemplation of some image of what we think or feel something outside of us, but it's really coming in within. And a couple different meditations to help us we can cultivate feelings and we can recognize feelings. So cultivating, breathing in, I feel happy. Breathing out, I feel happy. Becoming aware, breathing in, I'm aware of my mental formations. Breathing out, I'm aware of my mental formations. Thus, we train ourselves. Concentration, this takes time, but that mindfulness helps us develop that concentration immediately. Concentration power is a strength that comes from practicing the mindfulness. It helps us attain that insight and understanding. And this mindfulness and concentration is a great spiritual force. And there's a saying when it comes to practicing mindfulness is that because this is a way that we try to present, I'll talk more about it later, but we try to present this mindful state of being in every moment of our daily lives. And they say it's hardest to practice at home. I hear this from the monastics quite often. They say, we have it easy, they tell me, because they're in the monastery. So the hardest, they say, is at home, the second in public, and the easiest is in the pagoda, the church, the meditation hall. And then as I've explained and talked about before already, that insight is attained through the practice of stopping and looking deeply. So sitting meditation is not to think, reflect, or lose ourselves in concepts or discriminations, and is not also to sit and just be immobile like the stone or a trunk of a tree. It's to become aware, practicing mindfulness, concentration, and insight. And I want to just say a little bit here as well. There's mindfulness buzzwords, and lots of people are using mindfulness for different things. Even the military is using mindfulness. Corporate executives to earn more money are using mindfulness. This can be used as a tool to gain something. And here, the Buddhist way is how we are. Mindfulness always leads to love. It leads to understanding. It leads to peace, compassion. It's how we present ourselves. It's how we are. It's not a means to get anything. It's being in the present moment, being right here, right now. If it's a means, then it's not true mindfulness. Next slide. So I was taught all this by Thich Nhat Hanh. I discovered him about 21 years ago and had the pleasure of going on retreat and receiving the 3 jewels and the 5 mindfulness trainings and the Dharma name, loving embodiment of the heart in 2009. And Thich Nhat Hanh is the beloved father of Plum Village tradition that I belong to, and he trained mainly in the Vietnamese Zen and the Mahayana Buddhist traditions. So please don't ask me a question about that. I've heard there's some Theravada thrown in there as well. So he's a great student. He's studied a lot. And he is called Thai often, which is a Vietnamese word for teacher. He's called Thai by his friends and students. And he's a global spiritual leader, poet, artist, author, peace activist, revered throughout the whole world. And as I've been sharing, his key teaching is that through mindfulness, we can learn to live happily in the present moment. And Dr. Martin Luther King called him an apostle of peace and nonviolence. The media has called him the father of mindfulness, and the other Dalai Lama and the Zen master who fills stadiums. I saw something because filling stadiums, I was with him in this one big great hall and I could barely hear a word he was saying because he's so humble and so quiet. And he's written over 100 books in English, ranging from updating ancient Buddhist sutras, writing manuals on meditation, mindfulness, and engaged Buddhism. And he's a wonderful poet, and he's written children's stories. And he was born in central Vietnam in 1926, and today he's 95. He became a novice monk at the age of 16, and in the early 1950s, he was actively engaged in the movement to renew Vietnamese Buddhism. When war came to Vietnam, monks and nuns were confronted with the question of whether to adhere with the contemplative life and stay meditating in the monasteries or to help those around them who were suffering under the bombings and turmoil of war. And Thich Nhat Hanh was one of those who chose to do both, and in so doing, he founded the modern engaged Buddhist movement. He felt that the people of Vietnam had lost touch with the religion, and he was determined to reconnect them to the teachings of the Buddha. And he did this by teaching and spreading the practice of mindfulness among his students, updating and translating various sutras, and engaging in social work, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. And I want to point out the pictures that I chose of him. I like this one because he's outside, he's with the bell, with one of his monastics and with the child, holding. The children are just always so central with him, and walking meditation or his talks, the children are always centered around him. And then here's a picture of him with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In the 60s when they were in the United States talking about peace and ending the Vietnam War. Right now, in 2014, when he was 89, he suffered a stroke. And right now he's unable to speak, and he's mostly paralyzed on the right side, but he continues to offer his presence. He often shares with us that it's not the words and the teaching that's as important as the way that you are, that the way you walk, the way you present yourself is itself a teaching, and he's still giving us that gift today. Participating in meals, in meditations and ceremonies as much as his health will allow. I chose to focus on the 1960s in his life because this is just such a formative period of his teachings and the establishment and birth of Plum Village Community of Engaged Buddhism. In 1961, Thich Nhat Hanh came to America to study and teach comparative religion at Princeton University. And when he was in the United States, he also was at Columbia, who employed him as a lecturer, and he became fluent in many languages. In 1963, he returned to Vietnam, and he established a LeBoy publishing house, which published many of his books and pamphlets that he would use to distribute among the people across war-torn Vietnam to promote peace. And he taught Buddhist Prajnaparamita literature and Buddhist psychology at Van Han Buddhist University in Saigon. And then in 64, he joined university students and professors and established the School of Youth for Social Service. It's a relief organization that helped to construct schools, healthcare clinics, and rebuild entire villages that were destroyed during the war. They braved the mine-laden fields of the embattled countryside to bring food, clothing, building materials, and medical supplies to villagers all throughout Vietnam whose homes and families had been destroyed. And they rebuilt villages sometimes 3, 4, 5 times. They didn't give up. They didn't want to give in to despair. If they were bombed, they rebuilt. And then that's staying true to his principles, even during those difficult situations, he promoted nonviolence and peace throughout Vietnam. He didn't take sides between North and South. The situation was challenging because the School of Youth for Social Service helped both the communist and the anti-communist alike, and something that really earned them the ire of both sides. They faced threats to their life, and many lay people, monks, and nuns were murdered during that time. Some of Thich Nhat Hanh's good friends he lost. However, they continued to work despite the harassment and murder of many of their members. And at the height of the war, in 1964, is when Thich Nhat Hanh established the Order of Interbeing, and in 1966, he ordained the first 6 members, and all of them were members of the board of the School of Youth for Social Service and dedicated to and committed to the principles of engaged Buddhism. And from its early inception, the order was comprised of the fourfold Buddhist Sangha, that monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen, where members vow to study, practice, and observe the 14 mindfulness trainings. These guidelines helped the first 6 brothers and sisters to develop the serenity that they needed to look deeply into what was going on around them in the tragedy of war. And when I say look around them, it wasn't seeing any enemy. It was not even the people dropping the bombs. It wasn't an enemy. The enemy was ignorance, and their antidote was compassion and peace. They continued to stay busy helping war victims, organizing demonstrations, printing those books and leaflets, running social service projects, and they organized an underground for draft resistors. And in the midst of all of that, they renewed themselves with the day of mindfulness, where they stopped all work, came together, just practiced mindfulness, breathing, walking, being together, and rejuvenated each weekend. And there are over 400 members of the order today, including myself, and hundreds of sanghas and local communities around the globe who come together to study, practice, and discuss the 14 mindfulness trainings. And in 1966, Thich Nhat Hanh traveled once more to the US and Europe to make the case for peace and to call for the end of hostilities for Vietnam. But while he was there, both the North and South refused him the right to return, and he was exiled from his home country. He gained asylum in France. That's where Plum Village was established. And in 1969, he first established the Unified Buddhist Church in France. And he continued to travel widely after that time. So during the Vietnam War, when they were doing their work as a form of protest, some of the monks would commit self-immolation to protest, as a protest tactic. And in May 1967, Nat Chi Mai, one of the first 6 of the order members, immolated herself in peace. And there's a picture of that on the cover of his book, Lotus in the Sea of Fire. And in 1965, Thich Nhat Hanh, he was writing to Dr. King, and he explained about immolation when Dr. King asked him. And he said, sometimes we have to burn ourselves in order to be heard. It is out of compassion that we do that. It is an act of love and not an act of despair. And I included, there's a picture. This top one is of some of the students in the youth of the school bringing food to villagers after flooding. And then there's also a picture in the 1970s. They did a lot of work to rescue Vietnamese boat people. And there's a picture of a woman and her husband next to a painting of a boat that they were rescued on. So So this is the 5 mindfulness trainings. It's a little bit more than the 5 precepts of the Buddha. It kind of took a snapshot of all the words that are contained in there. The mindfulness trainings are a living document. It's one of the ways that we practice together. They have their roots in the 5 precepts, and the trainings are about protecting life, reverence for life, true happiness, true love, loving speech and deep listening, and nourishment and healing, which is about consumption, helping us not bring toxins and poison into our body. And the trainings were written to be a concrete expression of the Buddha's teachings on the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. And they're non-sectarian, and their nature is universal. So, like I said, they're a living document. They've been expanded and updated, so they represent a way to bring mindfulness into every area of our life. And rather than hard and fast rules, they offer us a framework to reflect on our actions, speech, and thinking. The Plum Village community of engaged Buddhism was founded in 1998, officially to represent Thich Nhat Hanh in a Sangha in the United States. So it's kind of a sister to that Unified Buddhist Church. And it has 3 practice centers in the U.S., Deer Park, Magnolia Grove, and Blue Cliff. So one's in New York, Mississippi, and then California. There's Parallel Press, the publishing agency, and then Thich Nhat Hanh Foundation is the fundraising arm. The Buddha respected people's desire to practice their own faith, and that is embedded into Plum Village. Many people from many different backgrounds come and stay at the monasteries. And Thai says that the best way to realize the Buddhist spirit is to preserve our own roots. And if we're cut off from our roots, we cannot be happy. And on trips to Magnolia Grove and Blue Cliff, I actually had the pleasure of meeting monastic brothers who are also Catholic priests. And Thich Nhat Hanh often refers to the kingdom of heaven and the pure land of the Buddha in his teachings. And among his books are Buddha and Jesus' Brothers, Living Buddha, Living Christ, and The Raft is Not the Shore, Conversations Toward a Buddhist Christian Awareness, which is a dialogue between him and Daniel Berrigan, Thich Nhat Hanh, Martin Luther King Jr., and Thomas Merton, I believe, are all members of I'm forgetting now. They were all members of an organization for peace during that time, and it'll come to me later. So visits to the monastery, anybody can go and visit the monastery. Some of them are actually open right now. And they offer a direct experience to practice in daily life. So some Buddhist traditions, you go into monasteries and retreats and you sit and walk and sit and walk and sit, and that's the whole thing as we're meditating for days on end, and it's different here. So there's morning meditation, evening meditation, there's walking meditation. We mindfully cook, we mindfully clean the bathroom. I've had that job. We mindfully chop vegetables, mindfully eating. Also time for deep relaxation. Beginning anew, practices are taught for reconciliation and developing compassion and love in families and communities. And usually once a day, we'll have a Dharma talk, a teaching. And unique to the Plum Village tradition and any other Buddhist tradition that I'm aware of today, actually, I think it's the only one where we have what's called Dharma Discussions. It's a time where we come together and share with each other. It's central to our practice together of what we're experiencing, what we're learning, sharing our practices, our difficulties, and we can just rest in the arms of the Sangha, as we call it, and in that collective wisdom. Studying is a smaller part. It's important. We study the sutras, we study the trainings, but if we're studying, we should be practicing 2 times, 5 times, 10 times more. So, decision making is done by consensus. So the most important thing is Sangha harmony. And if at any time there's not harmony, we stop what we're doing and we work on that. And so sometimes it can take a long time for decisions to be made. I remember one monastic telling us about it taking several months to get something like a mixer or something like that. In the kitchen. And so every single person's voice is important. They go by the collective wisdom. So the newest person in the Sangha and the oldest person in the Sangha, all of them have a chance to be heard. And within the Plum Village community of engaged Buddhism and within the order of interbeing, there's members who come together with special causes that are dear to them, and some different branches have broken out, other different sub-sanghas, as you will, where people concentrate on. And one of them is called Arise, and that's awakening through race, intersectionality, and social equity. And they came up with the gathas for healing and racial contemplations on the 5 mindfulness trainings and offer retreats for people of color. There's a Wake Up movement for young mindfulness practitioners between 18 and 35. There's an LGBTQIA+ international community, and they recently offered an international queer retreat. And there's the Earth Holder community, which is a mindful earth justice initiative. And today there are over 700 monks and nuns worldwide and tens of thousands of lay students, as well as over 1,000 local mindfulness practice communities called sanghas. And that brings me to Open Heart Mindfulness Community. Here is the Sangha in Green Bay. So when I received the 5 mindfulness trainings in 2009, one of my aspirations was to build a community here in Green Bay to practice with and to help support my practice and so I could support others. And in 2011, I finally had the courage to do it. So started it. We're very small when we get together. I mean, we've met for an hour and a half at a time, and we sit together in a circle on cushions on the floor or else on a chair. Some people have even laid down, so we're not very strict. And maybe 3 people, 8 people, 10 people, so not a lot. And we practice sitting meditation together, walking. We share the teachings together, and we have time for discussion where we each take turns bowing in and bowing out, and listening gives us an opportunity to listen deeply, to be aware of our speech, all ways that we can practice together. And we enjoy singing songs to end, to nourish joy. And over the years, we've had people join us from the Hindu, Jewish, Christian, and other different religious backgrounds. So everybody's always welcome to come in. And it's been a little hard over COVID. We lost a lot of people going over Zoom. It's hard getting, people to come in, and we had people already get up and leave when they hear mindfulness community, and they don't realize it has its roots in Buddhism. It's not a huge focus. We talk about it, but it's not, everybody brings their own focus. But we've had people already get up and leave too when they found that out. So, I mean, it's not for everybody, but everybody can come in as they need to. And we hope it'll be going. We had to stop for a few months over the summer, but we're back on Sunday nights, and we started small. We're starting at an hour with sitting and a teaching and a discussion. So we'll see where it goes. And with that, I'm ready for questions.
I just want to make an observation. I belong to a Benedictine order, and there's so many parallels. And you could be talking about the order of St. Benedict.
Yeah.
Jody, before you get started on the questions, we had a person write in on the chat that this is a great presentation and that they are learning so much. So,
Wonderful.
A deep word of appreciation for what
Thank
you're
you.
doing.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I think I can get all these, so thank you. First one, what books would you recommend a newcomer start off with? there are many, many to choose from. So
Well, which one?
Thich Nhat Hanh, if you're looking for Thich Nhat Hanh, basic practice, his Miracle for Mindfulness, I think, was one of the first books that he wrote it was distributed throughout Vietnam to help the people during war, to have them to, there's so much suffering and killing, and it was he gave them to help develop peace and stability. So that's a good one. Any of the books with peace in the title generally are good. And
Where do you find the dharmas? Where do you find like the sayings? Are those in those? Is there, like for Christians we have a Holy Bible. Is there such a thing for the Buddhists?
that would be the sutras. So the question was asking about like where they would find like the gathas, prayers, and reference to the Holy Bible. So the sutras would have it, but also Thich Nhat Hanh developed a whole bunch of poems or gathas, as we like to call them. I have them hanging up all over my house to remind me to be mindful. Waking up this morning, I smile, 24 brand new hours are before me. I vow to live fully in each moment and look at all beings with the eyes of compassion. So there's, in his books, those are scattered throughout. I'm not so sure if the Miracle Mindfulness has those in there. No Mud, No Lotus, probably. There's a love book, which is all about the loving kindness meditations. That's a good book. There is a book that we have, I forget the name of it, but it's a practice manual that he put together with some of the sutras and ceremonies and different things in there. And that one, I wouldn't recommend starting off with that one, but yeah. Any belief about an afterlife? Well, it depends upon which form of Buddhism. So in different, there's a Book of the Dead, there's different Buddhists, different streams that have different beliefs. In this specific stream, it is impermanence and transformation. And we're always in the process of transformation. There is no birth, there is no death. And when we can reach insight and enlightenment, and we realize that there's no subject, no object, that concept of interbeing, that order of interbeing that he created, we don't die, we transform. And it's our thoughts, our words, our actions that live on. And we become part of life. And based upon science, I'm hearing him in some of his later talks, he would reference the physicists and the scientific teachings in terms of what happens to matter and the transformation. So in this tradition, that's the belief. Some aspects of the Eightfold Path more important than others. Everything is contained in. It's said if you practice one deeply, you will practice them all deeply. For example, right livelihood. In order to be aware, am I practicing right livelihood? We have to pay attention. To pay attention, we have to be mindful. To be mindful, we need to concentrate. And so that view that we have, the mindfulness is really the base of it, and remembering just to keep doing it for myself. My next question is, how has my understanding of Buddhism changed over time? For myself, that diligence, that effort, that daily practice is important. To be mindful, to understand, then I can look at the different aspects of the path. And how has my understanding changed over time? At first, it was about, when I first started practicing, I was drawn to the tradition to kind of heal my own self, my own suffering, what was going on. And I really connected deeply to the Understanding Our Mind book. That's a heavier one. That's a heavier one that really gets into all the stuff going on in the causes and conditions, and gets into all the different roots that we have. It started out with just that basic breathing in and breathing out, and developing concentration, developing the stamina and the will to keep at it over and over again. And understanding in myself that there was suffering, the change happened, understanding that the people that I feel that may have caused me harm or I have difficulty with, they suffer too. And the change, it opened up my relationship. Everybody changed around me, but really they didn't change, only I changed. So the understanding, the insight comes with the practice. I didn't realize really what Buddhism even was. The first time I saw it was with the Dalai Lama's monks when I was going to Lakeland University, and they came with the mandala, the sand painting, and I just cried. Tears, something, I don't know what it was. It just hit in my body and my heart and my soul, and I just cried, and I felt it again the first time I saw Thich Nhat Hanh and received the 3 refuges. And it was a going from this mind experience of trying to figure out what it is and going into the felt body experience. That's how it changes. I think I got all the questions, unless there's any more online or anybody has another one they want to throw out. We have a couple minutes. Okay. Well, it's been lovely. Thank you for listening and sticking with me. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Our next community faith conversation is December the 13th. We will have Dr. Andrew O'Connor from St. Norbert's College speaking to us about Islam. Dr. O'Connor is the Assistant Professor of Theology and Religious Studies at St. Norbert's College, and he got his bachelor's from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, his master's from the University of Chicago, and his PhD from the University of Notre Dame. So he will be speaking to us about the beliefs and practices of the Islamic community. Thanks to everybody for being here, and thanks more importantly for Jody for sharing so deeply of yourself and helping us to understand our Buddhist sisters and brothers even better than we did before. We have a small reception prepared for you in the parish hall. So if you go out the back door here and turn back to your left and then back to your right, you'll be in the parish hall. We've got some cupcakes and some coffee and some other goodies to gather around as we continue the conversation. Unfortunately, our virtual friends will not be able to join us for cupcakes and coffee, but we hope that you will join us next time for our next community faith conversation. Thanks so much.
So, Jody, I went to seminary, and we actually, I actually worked at a seminary in Chicago, and
It's not fun.
yes, he actually suggested reading in his syllabus because we, this year, will not study the spiritual direction. And he was, and I don't know how I even missed that Buddhism was practiced. Okay, so you used to consider yourself a Catholic? Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I kind of
Practice it as much as always.
yeah, I mean, I think there's the one thing that so I think I really want to follow this deeper into
It's so approachable though.
yeah, it's so beautiful, and I know this poem
It's very
really
easy to understand. It's very gentle.
yeah, I think that
It's poetry. When I before when I was asked for it, I had to answer how am I holding on to my books. You know, it was an important part to be able to enter into this, not let go of it.
yeah, it's great, because I think that that's where you want to cross the bridge, what you learned on this was abusive, and it's going to heal you, and cause, give you greater peace, because some people are
And there's some things, I mean, there's still transforming even within now. It's like one of the 5 mindfulness trainings that I actually love is talking about making a deep long-term commitment. They go to many known to their family and friends. And there's a lot of people in the peer community who are like, they're like, no, we cannot do that safely. So they're inviting that. And
That's interesting. Yeah, I'd love to hear that. Because you can't, yeah, safety. Definitely.